Well, I think it's the top of the hour, 9 o'clock for me. Welcome everybody. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good in between from wherever you might be joining us in the world. We're so excited that you're here. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. There we go. My name is Anthony Austin. I am the Global Marketing Manager here at Medix Biochemica. I'm joined here with our co-host, Herman Zoiderveld, who is an internal expert on this topic and is a senior global product manager with us. My time at Medix Biochemica has seen me through R&D, manufacturing, product management, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So today I'm extra excited on a couple levels. One being that this is the first time that we've actually hosted our own similar type of webinar. We hope for the first of many. So if you enjoy it, please go and tell your colleagues to come back for the next one. But also, this is some really cool and important science that we're discussing, and that's why we've got Herman here to go through it. A little bit of housekeeping for me. I'll give a little bit of what to expect. I'll lead in the topic, and then I'll pass it over to Herman for the more technical aspects of the talk. So thank you again for everybody who's registered. Being a registrant means that after this, we will follow up with you on well, thank you, but also to give you a link to the recording, as well as the slides that we go through. You'll also see, for me, it's the top of my screen, but there's a Q&A section. Please feel free to jump in and ask any questions that you have during this. At the end of this talk, we'll spend some time to go through any questions that we get. I do apologize in advance if we either run out of time or this being kind of a technical topic, we might require a little bit of research to get you a precise answer, but I can guarantee that if you do ask us a question and we're not able to get to you in time, we'll follow up and get you the answers that you need. Let's see what else. First, a little bit of background on Medix Biochemica. Our company is an international, independent, and industry-leading IVD raw material supplier. If you haven't interacted with Medix Biochemica in the past 4.5 years, you've missed a lot of growth, especially in our expansive portfolio and our offerings, as well as our geographic expansion. In the 1980s, Medix Biochemica was founded in Espoo, Finland, right outside of Helsinki, and was one of the first players on the field to provide high-quality monoclonal antibodies at scale. And in that same 4.5-year period of growth, what we've expanded to be able to offer is now not only many more of those same kind of antibodies, but also antigens, native and recombinant proteins, clinical enzymes, biospecimens, molecular diagnostics. We always say, if there's an IVD need you have, chances are we IVD that. And it also is a good time to mention that even though we have 5,000 products on the shelf ready for you, we also have a suite of contract and custom services. So if you can't find what you have, please contact us. And you can contact us at info@medixbiochemica.com if you don't know your individual sales managers. But if you email us at info@medixbiochemica.com for any questions you have, if you can't find it on the off the shelf, then there's a good chance that we can work with you to produce the product that you need, whether it be purifying a protein, manufacturing a antibody, whatever it is. We want to work with you from commercial or from development all the way through to commercial. I also mentioned that we expanded globally. So when I said we started in Espoo, Finland, in the past half a dozen years or so, we've also expanded to have manufacturing sites in China, in France, Germany, and 2 sites in the United States. That includes St. Louis, Missouri, where I'm at currently, and Weston, Florida, which is just outside of Miami. So we want to be where you are when you need us, and have what you need. We want to be your first choice raw material supplier, our partner for the IVD industry. So all that upfront boring stuff, let's get it into the reason why we're here. Our webinar is entitled "Enabling Better Infection Differentiation Using Inflammation Biomarkers, Marker Panels to Determine Bacterial versus Viral Origin." I'll go through a couple things before passing it over to Herman for an introduction, a better introduction to himself, and then to get into the technical aspects of the talk. First, I'll talk a little bit about the background between exactly what is the difference between a bacteria and a virus and the current state of diagnosing each. Then we'll get into the dangers of getting a diagnosis wrong, or put another way, the importance of getting it right. And that's when I will pass it over to Herman to get into some more of the details on a trend he's found in the scientific publications in which biomarkers are being used for better differentiation. First, high level difference between bacteria and virus. Well, they're both really small, but viruses are much smaller than bacteria, and that's because they're quite a simple organism or form. They're really just a genetic piece of material, like a DNA and RNA wrapped into a protein shell. Bacteria, on the other hand, are a true living organism. They don't require a host to replicate, and they are much larger than bacteria. When we think about bacterial infections, they're usually localized. Think strep throat or gonorrhea, whereas on the other side, a viral infection generally is more systemic. So think influenza or the common cold. But the most important thing to discuss on this slide is how we treat them. If you go to the doctor and you're diagnosed correctly with having a bacteria, the doctor will prescribe you antibiotics to kill that infection. Now, no matter how good or powerful or pointed or advanced or anything that an antibiotic is, it will not do anything for a viral infection. And that's a key thing to gauge this conversation. In this next slide, we'll get into what's the current state of getting a diagnosis. So some of this, right now, if I go to the doctor to get the diagnosis, the doctor will look at my symptoms. So how long have I been sick, the length of illness, the color of mucus, observing my throat, if I'm tired, if I have a fever. These are the things that doctors are using right now to decide whether you're sick with a virus or a bacteria. And as you can probably see, that's quite subjective. There's not a definite, if you've been sick for this many days, you have this, or if your mucus is this color, you have that. So unfortunately, with it being so subjective, it's many times the case that the doctors get it wrong. What's the importance of that? Why do we care if we get it right or wrong? Well, there's two main ways. So in the first scenario, let's imagine I go to the doctor and I actually have a viral infection, but the doctor looks at my symptoms and diagnoses it as a bacteria. Well, being a responsible healthcare physician, he says, this guy has a bacterial infection, let's give him antibiotics. Well, I really have the viral infection, so those antibiotics aren't doing anything to make me better. In fact, if you imagine taking bacteria when you don't need it, it will kill some bacteria in you, but by definition, the bacteria that are left standing are a bit more, for whatever reason, less sensitive to that bacteria. If you take that over and over and over, what you can imagine is, and magnify it towards the entire society and really across the world, if we are taking too many antibiotics, what we're left with is highly resistant bacteria. And even superbugs have begun to form in which they don't respond to any antibiotics. So in one case, getting it wrong leads to antimicrobial resistance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. On the other side, let's go in and say, I go to the doctor and I actually have a bacterial infection, but the doctor looks at my symptoms and says, I think you have a virus. Well, if it's a virus, then he will not prescribe antibiotics. And so the bacterial infection that is making me sick isn't being treated. And if it's left untreated, what that can lead to is a life-threatening situation called sepsis. And we'll get a little bit more into that in these next slides as well. So how big of a problem is antimicrobial resistance? Well, it's so big that the World Health Organization, the WHO, has put it as a top 10 global health threat facing humanity. Now, that's a big statement, and so they're absolutely right. And in fact, they estimate that if we don't act quickly to curb the antimicrobial resistance, the cost on the global economy can be $100 trillion annually by the year 2050. That's 100 trillion with a T. So it's definitely something, if we can make better and we can curb, then we can, it's certainly an important thing to do. But how bad is it? So let's think about those two scenarios. Later on in the discussion, we'll have some more engaging interactive polls, but for this one, we can just kind of formulate an answer in our head. You can shout it out if you want to, but nobody will be able to hear it. But let's think about the first scenario. So I'm a patient and I walk in and I actually have a viral infection. How many times do you think the doctor gets it wrong and overprescribes antibiotics? Would you be surprised to know that 50% of the cases in this scenario are overprescribed? So think about that. 1 out of every 2 times a person goes into the doctor with a viral infection, they're given an antibiotic. So if we can do something to get a better diagnosis, then the time is of the essence. On the other hand, if I walk into a doctor's office and I actually have a bacterial infection, how many times do you think the doctor gets it wrong in that sense? It assumes that I have a virus and then doesn't prescribe antibiotics. Well, the number's much lower. However, 20% is still quite a bit. Think about that. 1 out of 5 times when I need an antibiotic, I'm not getting it. So this really points to the inadequacy of our current state of getting a differential diagnosis between bacterial and viral infections. Sepsis, this is the scenario when we needed the antibiotic and don't get it, is a devastating thing for individuals, families, and really global health. You can see in each of these shapes, the stats are pretty staggering. Over 11 million deaths are estimated. 40% of the cases are less than 5 years of age, and 26% of the deaths. So 26% of the 11 million deaths are from patients under the age of 5. And it's a leading cause of hospitalizations. So this is staggering, and these are 2 very important things to get right. Now I present Herben to present a better way. Herben, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Anthony, for the introduction. I will introduce myself very shortly. So my name is Gerben Zuiderveld. You can hear that I'm from the Netherlands, probably, and I worked 21 years as a global product manager in autoimmunity and allergy, and just recently, working for Medix Biochemica, and I'm responsible for inflammation, cardiac, and other markers. So when I was traveling and going to symposia and other like ADLML or ACC or EuroMedLab, this is always a high potential study things where you can see that there's a lot of interest in doing it. But if I look to what is produced at the moment, then it's not so much. So I started thinking about, okay, what is published? So I looked at the publications and the markers which are available in order to, what is the best marker for the differentiation between a viral and a bacterial infections. And I came up with the following. And the reason why I came up with the following is the fact that it takes around 20 years from a publication that it is in routine. So of course there are new markers identified, but I think it will take a long time before they are here. So I focused on the most common ones, and I think everybody recognizes C-reactive protein. I think it's standard on every big IVD instrument or analyzer, and also in the point of care testing, C-reactive protein is not unfamiliar. So if you look to the studies which started a long time ago up to recently, is that there is a trend in going. So everybody tried to find a very good cutoff to differentiate between a viral infection and bacterial infection. And viral infections are in causing lower C-reactive protein results compared to the bacterial ones. But everybody is always, trying to find the right cutoff, and there is not a harmonization. So different IVD companies have different IVD test results for CRP protein, but they try to have it around 20, so which is very conservative. But 20 is everything below 20 would be then a viral infection, and everything about 20 milligram per liter above would be a bacterial infection. And it is working, but it is not working correctly. So you still have it's still flipping a coin. Is it a viral or is it a bacterial infection? And therefore you need other markers additional to CRP and different combinations to see what is exactly done or what it would be the best thing. So what the latest trend is for one marker in CRP reactivity is the velocity. So to see the patients come in, you measure the CRP test, and then you have your test result, and after an hour or 5 hours, you measure it again, and you try to see, okay, what is how fast is the CRP going up, and divided by the time, and is that a good indication for a viral or bacterial infection? And those are the latest. So that is from 2020 until now, where they looked at C-reactive protein as a single marker. But I still think the combination is the most important one. So the next one is also 50 years old. And it's called serum amyloid A. It's in the Western world, and with Western world, I mean Europe and US. It's a little bit undervalued in my eyes, because serum amyloid A has potential especially in rheumatic diseases, inflammatory rheumatic diseases, and you can really make a difference if you want to detect rheumatoid arthritis or monitor these patients. And serum amyloid A is a very, very good one. And there is also a very strong connection to cardiac involvement or renal involvement. If you have high serum amyloid A and you have an autoimmunity disease, it's a high potential that also your heart or your kidney will be involved in it. And there's a lot of studies about it, but we'll skip back to the serum amyloid A in combination to viral and bacterial infection. So basically, serum amyloid A is much faster raising than C-reactive protein if you look to a viral or a bacterial infection. So it is one of the first which come up. And what is described in literature is basically that you have a lot of patients who have a bacterial infection, and the serum amyloid A is high and C-reactive protein is also high. And that is a little bit different compared to the viral infection, because sometimes the serum amyloid A is already very high and C-reactive protein is low or even in the normal ranges. And these studies are mostly coming from Asia, China in this case, where they use it as a differentiator between viral and bacterial infections. And there is also now some interest in velocity. So you measure after the time, several times, the serum amyloid A and C-reactive protein. And based on those test results, you can have a better differentiation between viral and bacterial infections. So the other one is IL-6. I think everybody knows IL-6 already. It's related to a lot of diseases. And it's what you can see in general is that CRP, PCT, or IL-6 are really elevated in bacterial infections compared to viral infections. So in viral infections, you probably have a normal or a low IL-6. And if you have a bacterial infection, it's probably much, much higher. And what is also seen is that people or patients with high IL-6 levels have probably a gram-negative bacteria infection, and those who have a gram-positive will probably have a lower one. But that's of course, really, it depends on the IL-6 and the IVD test that you are using in your setting. So, but it has some potential, and especially also when there is a co-infection. So if you have a viral and a bacterial infection, then IL-6 is really, really high compared to the other ones. So that leaves us with procalcitonin, and procalcitonin is a very interesting one because it started very promising as a sepsis, and it is really good for sepsis marker, and that you also can, based on the test result itself, that you can make a decision of to prescribe antibiotics or do not prescribe antibiotics. And in the beginning of procalcitonin, everybody was in favor of using this marker for prescription or for antibiotics or not. That it has a very clear differentiation and can help the doctor to make this final treatment. So the last studies are saying the opposite. It's even recommended or accepted by the FDA, but last studies are implementing that procalcitonin alone should not be used for treatment of antibiotics, that it is not, not totally 100% accurate, and therefore you should be carefully treated, and maybe you should have additional markers into it. But it's a very big debate between different publications, but I just want to highlight this, that it is momentarily going on. So some are believing in it, some say you shouldn't do it, and I just communicate to you, and you can decide on your own what you think about it. The other one is which is TRAIL, or tumor necrosis TNF related apotheosis inducing ligand, which I will now abbreviate to TRAIL. And those publications which you see in viral and bacterial differentiation is mainly done when you compare them, or when they are done with IP10 and CRP in general. And that has, because of one of the companies has done a lot of publications promoting this combination. And that's why you find a lot of TRAIL publications in that area. And the reason why I think they use TRAIL, or not the reason why they use TRAIL is probably it has an impact on virus infected cells. So if you have an infected cell, then TRAIL will force it to go, that the infected cell goes to apotheosis. So it becomes available for phagocytosis and macrophage, which probably inhibits the virus inhibitions or replication. So it inhibits the virus to multiply more. And you can see clearly in those viral patients that the TRAIL is very high compared to bacterial infection, when basically it's even below normal. So it goes the opposite direction. And this makes TRAIL a very potent marker for this differentiation between viral and bacterial infection. But it cannot be used standalone. And I think that's important to highlight in this case. The other one, which is quite commonly used for viral infections in general, is IP10, or interferon gamma inducible protein 10. And it's produced in airways when it is a virus infection in general, and the concentrations can be very, very high. And especially in the acute respiratory infections, you can see that it is correlating also with the severity and the durations and the illness of the symptoms. So it has a very good, it's a very good marker for infectious to monitor with. And I think that's why IP10 is one of the markers which was also very potent. IP10 can also be seen in patients with HIV, so it's a very good one. And the last one, which is commonly or is now prescribed more and more, is NGAL. I think most of us knows it for kidney involvement or acute kidney injury, or people who need kidney transplant, because you can monitor the kidney function with this. And but NGAL is an important host defense for because it acts as an antibacterial agent. So basically, it belongs to the innate immune system, preventing bacteria to get more iron, and bacteria need the iron to grow faster. So NGAL is limiting the iron in the case when there is a bacterial infection, and you will see elevated levels in patients with bacterial infections. And it has another implication as well. It's described in other literature. If you have an IBD, that the last part of your gastrointestinal tract has the inflammation, so it has all other possibilities as well. So it's not only for viral, but you can do it for kidney as well, and in IBD as well. So these are the combination, or these are the markers which are oftenly used and also very much described in literature when we talk about viral or bacterial infections. So the next slide. And here you can see the plasma levels. So IL-6 is one of the first that comes up, followed by procalcitonin. SAA is also very at the beginning, and it will rise as higher than CRP. And if the treatment is working, you will see that SAA is also going faster down compared to CRP. So it's a very good marker for basically monitoring if the therapy is going in the right direction. So here you see an overview of the markers which I just described. So in the healthy, you see the normal values, more or less. And CRP is in virus elevated, but it's more elevated in bacteria. The same is true for SAA. It's elevated in virus, but more elevated in bacteria. But there was never a real cutoff described in literature between what should be used if you want to use it as this. And for CRP, 20 or 30 is always mentioned. IL-6, probably normal in viral infections, but really elevated in bacterial infections. And if you have a co-infection then between virus and bacteria, then it's really elevated. So it's a good marker in that area. Procalcitonin, a lot of debate in the last publications around it, but you can see in general that in viral infections it's low, and in bacterial infection it's pretty high. Trail is one of the most potent in my eyes to do the differentiation, but you cannot use it alone. You need other markers as well. Trail is highly elevated in viral infections, but it's even downregulated when you have bacteria infections. And IP10 is elevated in viral infections and limited in bacteria infections. And NGAL is the other way around. So probably it's negative in a viral infections and highly elevated in a bacterial infection. Next slide. So we start with some interaction. I think it's always good to do an interaction when you present something. So based on the symptoms, the question basically is, can you differentiate between a viral and bacterial infection? Or would you be, is it easy for you or not?
Okay. We should be able to vote now, and I see votes coming in, so that's great. So 5-year-old boy has difficult breathing. Has a fever. He's tired, coughing up yellow and green mucus. What do we think it is? Give it, let's say 30 more seconds, 20 more seconds.
So 70% thought about a bacterial infection and 32 thought about viral infections. And we leave it like this, and we now go to the second, because now you have done the lab work and you get the test results. And what would be your opinion now based on the lab test results? So CRP will be normal, SAA is elevated, IL-6 is normal, procalcitonin is normal, trail is elevated, IP10 is elevated, and NGAL is normal.
So I'll give it some more time. I think you might be able to see the results before I share it. So I think after this one, I have to end the poll and then share it, and the rest of the folks can see it.
So I think we're done, right? So basically, it's flipped around. So I think everybody agrees that lab test results are very important, because when I asked the previous questions, it was 80% on bacterial or 70% on bacterial. Now 80% of the population or of the participants thinks it's a viral infection. So I think it proves the fact that this is very good.
Try again.
To have lab results. So we have another one, basically the same symptoms with new test results.
Get that going.
And this question is the same: is it a viral or is it a bacterial infection? So everything is elevated, but trail is decreased in this case.
Give it 10 more seconds and I will share the results. And we got about 9 out of 10 said bacteria.
Yeah. So that's of course the right answer. And the last one will be a tricky one. That's a 77-year-old woman. CRP is because sometimes it's not black and white, right? So sometimes you have complicated patients in this case. So everything is elevated, and IP10 is really highly elevated, and NGAL is normal. And I just wait a little bit.
This one does look a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
Urban, am I right that IP10 is sometimes the one that can can be used to diagnose HIV as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So in this case, everybody who voted viral is correct. It is a viral infection, and I think you gave it away already for HIV, because then IP10 will also be very highly elevated in this case.
Got a bunch of doctors on the call today.
Yeah, I think so. So does it make sense for an IVD company to go into this field? Well, first of all, the WHO or WHO really is asking or is making a call to action for the IVD companies to go into this field, because of the fact that it is, the antimicrobial resistance is going in the wrong direction. So they really call IVD companies to produce and to develop tests that can help the doctor to make the better differentiation between viral and bacterial infections. So from that part, it makes sense, but also from an economical point of view, it makes sense, because over the years, IVD will grow, not only in certain countries, but basically across the globe. And the same is true for people over the age of 60 or 80. Everybody's getting older. It's not only in the Netherlands, but it's basically globally. We see this trend in every country across the globe. So people will live longer. And if you remember the first slide, which Anthony showed, most patients who are affected by the wrong treatment are those who develop sepsis, and that were the very young and the very old people. So it makes a lot of sense, and the prediction for this is also that the amount or request will grow for the coming years to have a better differentiation between viral and bacterial infections.
All right, we got the references.
Yeah, this is the reference. And
thank you, Herman. I want to highlight that, of course, thanks for the questions that have already come in. If there's any other questions, if you're like me, as soon as the time to ask questions is over, that's when all my questions begin. So please feel free to reach out to us at info@medixbiochemica.com. If you know your sales manager, feel free to reach out to them as well. But emailing us at info@medixbiochemica.com will allow us to get you in contact with the people who have those answers. And feel free to send in any feedback, any requested topics for future webinars, you name it. We want to work with you and make this fun. And then once you get the slide deck, this is also a link to the form to contact us directly. With that being said, I will stop sharing. And we've got just a couple questions for you, Herman.
Yeah.
Two of them kind of, I'll ask them at the same time because they kind of probably have the same answer. One is, do we need all of these markers? And two is there, if you don't need all of them, is there a best, quote unquote, best combination to get the biggest bang for your buck, I guess you could say?
Well, yeah. So first of all, no, you don't need all of them. But the most or the best publications around it is basically done by a company called MeMed, which has now patented CRP, trail, and IP10. So that's the combination which you will find in the most literature, and the studies that they have done are really good. And I think they have an agreement now with DSRN and Beckman Coulter to have that on their system. So if you want to have that combination, I think you need to reach out to them. But of course, other combinations are also mentioned. So CRP together with procalcitonin and SAA and IL-6 are mentioned, or CRP and SAA alone, or CRP and NGAL. So there are different combinations, and I think people need to understand that, yes, the combination CRP and trail and IP10 are the most well described, but that doesn't mean that there are more combinations possible. But there is the most time and most publications in. So I think there are other options as well, but not discovered yet, or not utilized to the maximum at this moment.
And then the last question is, do we provide all of these antibodies?
Yes, we do. We do have all the antibodies and also biospecimen or samples if you are interested in this, and also the antigens. Most of the antigens we have available as well. So we can provide you when you want to develop this test for your test system, or if you want to develop point of care test.
Okay, that was the last of the questions. I want to thank you, Herben, for well, thank you for doing all the research, so we don't have to do quite as much. And thanks for everybody who attended, some very early and some very late. So we appreciate your time. And again, we will reach back out to you to say thank you and to provide the live webinar and the slides. And like I said, info@medixbiochemica.com for any questions, feedback. Let's keep the conversation going. And with that, I will stop the recording and give everybody the rest of the day back. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Bye.